Dr. Roubini, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it almost seems sort of cliche today to say, you know, technology is changing our world in ways we could never imagine. But really, you know, in particular, the advances in robotics and artificial intelligence and specifically even machine learning are pointing to massive transformative change that could alter employment patterns forever. And so some are calling this sort of the second machine age. And I'm just wondering, how do you believe jobs and individuals in the West are going to be impacted by these sort of transformational changes?
There are two impacts that are important here. On one side, of course, all these technological innovations are going to increase productivity, makes goods and services cheaper, makes us smarter, and is innovations in information technologies, into manufacturing technology like robotic automation, nanotechnology, 3D printing, biotechnologies, energy technologies. So there's a new range of industries of the future. They're going to, of course, increase the way we work, we live, we entertain, and so on. That's the positive of it. The negative of this technological development is that these technological innovations are becoming increasingly capital intensive, skill biased, and labor saving. So to give you an example, you know, the factory of the future might be 1,000 robots and machines doing all the work, and maybe 1 or 2 people supervising these machines, and then there'll be a third guy sweeping the floor, and even the third guy sweeping the floor probably is going to be replaced soon by a Roomba robot who can clean the floor faster and cheaper than a human being. So the point is, we're going to create a lot of output, a lot of profits, a lot of wages and income for those who create and innovate these new technologies, but a lot of jobs are going to be shed. So that's one element of the technological innovation. The second element of the technological innovation is that now that technology allows many countries to join the global labor supply, not just for goods but services, many jobs have been offshored to the rest of the world. Initially it was blue-collar jobs, right? Everything was labor-intensive, like apparel, textiles, but even consumer electronic has gone from US, Europe towards Asia. But now services are also becoming tradable. So call centers are not based anymore in the United States, but they're based now in Mumbai or in Manila. And those jobs are again going to abroad. But today those jobs are going blue collar and white collar abroad, and that's the loss of jobs that we have to trade and globalization. But tomorrow, you know, a piece of software can do the same job better than even somebody in a call center in Manila, Mumbai. There'll be a voice recognition that recognizes your voice and answers your question when you make a call. So even those jobs in Asia may be lost because of technology. So I think we're in the middle of a massive revolution that, of course, is going to change productivity, profit, and so on, but it's going to also create a challenge for blue collars and white-collar jobs that are semi-skilled or unskilled, both the jobs and the incomes and the wages of these people, and that's a radical shift.
Yes, actually, you know, picking up on that point, you know, countries like you mentioned, like India, certainly countries like China, rely on this large sort of unskilled labor force, you know, to boost growth and be competitive in world markets. And so, how are they going to be impacted as this wave and this revolution happens with machine learning, for example?
Well, initially they are benefiting from trade and globalization because blue-collar and white-collar jobs went from US, Europe, and Japan towards India, China, and other emerging markets. But I think that they also will face the challenge that eventually technology is going to replace those jobs. So Foxconn, that produces in China, you know, the Apple iPhones and lots of other phones and consumer electronic, it was using millions of people as employees. But in the next 20 years, they want to replace a good chunk of these employees with robots and automation. So the big question for China or India is, are you going to grow rich before you grow old, or before essentially technology is going to replace those jobs? So those challenges today are jobs that are going from US, Europe, and Japan to emerging markets, but once technology is going to replace those jobs, it can replace them as much in India or China as it does in US and Europe. So these are really important things, and there is not a clear answer on how to deal with it.
So, you know, one thing that comes to mind is, how should individuals prepare for these coming changes? I mean, and specifically, what would you tell your niece or nephew today to study in college, preparing for these shifts?
It's absolutely right that any young person in making a decision about what to study is going to make important decisions about their lifetime. I would say that the era of having the same job for 10, 20 years is over. Every individual should be flexible enough to realize that he or she may change 5, 10, 15 times their jobs over the lifetime, because some sectors are going to rise, some sectors are going to fall. You have to be, first of all, how to say, literate on the digital economy and the various aspects of it. Doesn't mean that you should study necessarily computer or software or programming or science, but certainly having at least some coursework in these things is basic. And US ranks very poorly in terms of, science education. Therefore, scientific education and stuff that is digitally related is key. And I think that, investing into an education this broad that leads you to analytical and critical thinking, being able to think well, think deep, write well, is also going to be key. There'll be tons of jobs that are going to be replaced by first people in Asia and eventually by computers and software, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of that end.
Right.
So it's key what you study and how you study over time.
Yeah, that's some good advice. And finally, just the political and social consequences of that upheaval, or what that might do to those, these economic shifts, what that might do to the political and social realities. I mean, it might upend a lot of how we think about work and division of labor, not only in this country, but as you say, around the world. Does that concern you, or does that play into your mind at all?
It's a key issue because, as I pointed out, the combination of trade, globalization, and technological innovation is going to make lots of jobs in many parts of the world disappear, and high unemployment rate and the consequence of that in advanced economies, but also in emerging market, is going to be a source of social and political instability. And one of the other side consequences of all this innovation is also this rise of income and wealth inequality that is happening both in advanced economies and in emerging markets. This rise in inequality is partly driven by technology that, as I pointed out, is capital intensive, skill biased, and labor savings. So those who have financial and real capital are going to do well. Those who have skilled labor are going to do well. But the jobs and the incomes of those who are in skilled, semi-skills are going to be challenged. So that's a source of inequality. Two, trade and globalization is shifting many jobs in other parts of the world, and loss of jobs is in labor-intensive, low-value-added sectors. In advanced economies, you have 2.5 billion Chindians, Chinese and Indians, joining the global labor supply, and again, they're going to take over jobs that are in advanced economies. And you have also on top of it also these, winner-take-all effects or superstar. If you are the top economist, trader, banker, journalist, artist, rock star, athlete, your market today is not millions of people, but billions, the world, and you can extract more of the benefits of being a superstar in whatever is your field. So in the top of the income distribution, those at the top are doing better than everybody else. People talk about the top 1%, but within that top 1%, the 0.1% is doing better than the 1%, and the 0.01% is doing better than the 0.1%. So there is really this massive process that leads to winner-take-all effects that also exacerbates, on top of everything else, inequality. And eventually, inequality is problematic for two reasons. One is that leads to social and political instability. It leads to unrest, either revolution or violence or political change, and it may lead to severe then taxation of capital and those who have skilled. So it leads also to redistribution. And from an economic point of view, excessive inequality is bad for economic growth, because you are redistributing income from labor to capital, from wages to profits, and from people who have a high marginal propensity to consume, that are workers, to those who have a higher marginal propensity to save rather than spend, that are corporates or rich people. So one of the reasons why we have had very low growth in advanced economies for the last few years, anemic recovery, is the combination and the deadly interaction between high debt ratios. Individuals have too much debt, and there is rising inequality, and therefore their incomes are not growing and wages have been stagnant. That's a recipe for low consumption and low economic growth that eventually damages also profits and those who are doing well.
Right. Yeah, we're on the precipice of huge change, and you know, as you say, while we don't know how severely or how soon these changes are going to come to bear, I mean, that's up for a lot of debate. The winners in this sort of new economy, this second machine age, are going to be those, as you say, people who create ideas and who innovate. Thank you so much, Dr. Roubini, for joining us.
Great being with you.